Which one's bigger?
Of firewood versus charcoal? I don't know, man. I have a feeling charcoal is an urban luxury.
Yeah.
I think the poorer and the more rural you go, the more it's just firewood.
Okay.
Because charcoal is all about having something lightweight. And so they lose 90% of all the energy content of the wood in the course of turning it into charcoal, right? So they're burning it down so it's dense, but yet it's lightweight.
Okay.
And therefore it's easier to transport. But yet you've already burnt up 90% of its energy value just for its transportability.
Okay.
So it's just a horrible sacrifice. The other benefit of charcoal, though, to be fair, is that you can break it up into tiny, tiny bits much easier than you can break up wood.
Yeah.
It's dirty. Hands get covered with charcoal, but you can break it up. The other cool thing about charcoal is you can put out your fire with water, and then the next day you can still use it. You can't do that with wood. You can't, you waterlog your wood and you're waiting weeks before it dries enough before you light that on fire again.
Okay.
So charcoal's got two big advantages. It can handle getting wet and it can handle being broken up into little bits. So that's the attraction, and it's a revolution in its own way. It's a very tragic revolution that so many trees have to get cut down to make it.
Right.
But that's the way it is. I mean, we just have to plant more trees. I mean, thank God we can plant new trees. We should focus on doing that. Ethiopia is doing it. We should do it.
What's the charcoal used for?
Well, charcoal is used for all kinds of things. I mean, people roast everything with it, right? You walk the streets of Kampala, charcoal is everywhere. I mean, it's powering the Chikomando stand, the chapati maker, the lady roasting cassava, the lady roasting maize, or even boiling maize. She's using charcoal to boil the water. And, the roasting meats, whatever it is, goats or beef or chicken, they're all using charcoal. Yeah. And it's just everywhere.
So it's in the cities, it's basically the biggest.
Definitely, by far. By far, it's the biggest.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at. Okay. We may want to be elsewhere, but this is where we're at. Well, electricity is used here much more than long ago. Okay. Many more people have lights. Their lights are brighter than they ever were. Right. It's still pretty dark at night compared to Canada or the U.S.
Kenya, Nairobi.
Yeah, it's we don't have that much light here, but more than we did. Things have improved a lot, but it's still pretty dark at night, and especially with the curfews, because you don't even have the shops keeping their lights on. That used to add to the light, and it makes it less safe probably for people walking around at night, because light brings safety. That's one of the sad things about the curfew, because people still are walking around, and they're at risk of bad things happening. So, not that you have to be, not that this is that dangerous a place, but just, it's nicer to have light. Right. It's just, you can't argue with that. And even if you just need to go use the toilet outside, it's nice to have light. You don't know what's in the bathroom. So it's just, anyway, so energy, it's, people are using electricity, they're charging their phones. People are a lot of phone use. It's like phones are explosively being used. But it's, power is not stable here. And people here are all right with it. And they don't freak out about it at all.
Apparently we supply power outside the country, and that wouldn't stay. Is that true?
Well, the funny, weird thing is, a lot of the countries are supplying power to their neighbors. So it's kind of confusing, because everybody's supplying each other. Right. So, but yet we're not officially in a connected grid. So I have a feeling it's on the peripheries of each nation where someone's underserved. Maybe there's a factory in Western Kenya, that needs power, and the central government hasn't brought it out their way, or it's just not enough, and it's just more convenient for Uganda to supply it. I don't know if that's really happening, how much of it's happening. I know Ethiopia claims that once they fill their dam, they plan on supplying their neighbors, which it all sounds really strange because their own people don't have enough power. Their own people have so little electricity. Now, I believe the real problem is people just don't have the money to pay for it. And the cost of getting it to every little village is expensive.
Oh, like what do you?
Well, because you have to put cables, right? And you got to get rights of way, and you got to build stuff. So even to run each one of these wires to a little village, and to keep the transformers from shorting out, and the power poles from rotting and cracking and falling down during a storm, all that takes work to set up and work to maintain, and that has a cost. And then the bottom line is these people are barely in the cash economy. They're subsistence farmers. They're primarily living on what they grow. They're growing maize and they're growing beans, and that's what they're living on. They don't have that much extra to sell to have cash to pay for electricity. So the bottom line is they're subsistence farmers who don't have cash to pay for power, and yet the cost of putting the systems to reach them is expensive because they're in such remote, hard to get areas. Because the bottom line underneath all of this is that Africa is huge. It's just huge. I mean, Uganda is the size of the state of Utah, right? When you look on the map, and people tend to think Uganda's small, but it's the size of the state of Utah. That's just Uganda. Africa as a whole is the size of 3 1/3 Canada's. That's how big Africa is. And so you have so many different tribes here because there's so many cool little niches where people settle down. And they found a valley, they found a mountain area, they found a wetland or whatever, a lake, and they settled along it. And there's just so many places. It's because the place is so huge. And to reach all these little places, it has an expense. And what's amazing though is, okay, electricity has an expense, but what's interesting is how the bodas, the motorcycles, are now really like the networks holding the country together.
Really?
And because all these little former footpaths are now motorcycle paths too, right? And so they're, talk about change of speed, right? So now these little villages that used to be a long walk away are not so far motorcycle drive away. So that just radically compressed connectivity. And so that's what's happening. That's energizing the country. So these motorcycles, and this is motorcycle land. I mean, it's unbelievable. And people have sold off their family's land to buy motorcycles.
Bodabodas.
Yeah, they're called bodabodas. Means what? Border to border was the original word. As the idea they could go from one border to the next, and that's the legacy of President Museveni's investments in the road infrastructure. Is that now we really can drive border to border on decent roads. I mean, there's places that are not so great just yet, but give them another year or two, I think we'll have every corner of this country covered with decent roads, and with this exponentially growing fleet of motorcycles and 14-passenger taxis from Japan, and it's just the number of vehicles here is just huge. So that's all about energy, right? So we're and those are all traditional internal combustion engines, and they're it's changing people's lives. It's giving people more life to burn more oil.